After the agreement divorce, my best friend's ex-husband proposed to me. Milan. Sunlight streamed through the massive glass dome of the Galleria Vittorio Emanuele II, casting a brilliant glow on the polished marble floors. Sophia and I sat at an outdoor table of a century-old cafe, with our espresso and delicate cannoli nearly untouched before us. The air around was filled with the hubbub of tourists, the strains of O Sol Mio flowing from a street musician's accordion, and the rich aroma of leather and perfume wafting from luxury boutiques. To freedom, Sophia, my best friend with hair the color of a Venetian sunset, tapped the porcelain handle of her coffee cup lightly with her blood-red nail-polished fingertips. Her cat-like green eyes were brighter than the Milanese sun. And to seeing which of those spoiled Rothschild and Martini heirs will turn against each other for us first. My name is Isabella, and I come from a declining art dealer family in Florence. I swirled the dark liquid in my cup, savoring the unique mellow aroma and slight bitterness of Italian coffee. The steak. I looked up and asked calmly. Same old rule. Whoever makes those cousins fall out completely first gets 10% of the other's seed money. A smile curved her red lips, brimming with confidence in victory. Deal. Not far away, a commotion, deliberately muffled, gradually approached. The cousins representing Italy's old money tycoons and emerging capital, Luca Rothschild and Leon Martini, walked past, surrounded by a retinue of assistants. Luca, Sophia's chosen prey, had the signature dark brown curls of the Rothschild family and a slightly impatient expression. Even in a custom Brioni suit, he couldn't hide his tall, athletic build as a sailor. Leon, my nominal future husband and a regular on the covers of Martini family business magazines, was the epitome of a Milanese elite, wearing a perfectly tailored Zegna suit, with a well-practiced smile on his face that never truly reached his ice-blue eyes, as if veiled by the morning mist of the Apennines. Sophia and I exchanged a glance and clinked our cups silently. A absurd drama, with marriage as the stake and the friendship between the wealthy cousins as the target, officially kicked off under the witness of Milan, the city of fashion and money. Our weddings were held respectively at a villa by Lake Como and an ancient church in Venice, both lavish and extravagant, dominating the headlines of social media, and satisfying all the dignity demands of the two old families. After the wedding, Leon and I moved into his penthouse in downtown Milan, where one could see the Sforza castle at a glance from the window. The apartment was furnished with minimalist BB Italia furniture, and its cool-tone decor was just like Leon himself, exquisite yet utterly cold. My life was soon filled with various wife duties, accompanying Leon to charity galas at La Scala, maintaining a proper smile at Parmigiano Reggiano and Parma ham tastings, learning to distinguish the subtle differences between different vineyards in the Chianti region, and hosting weekend parties for dignitaries at the family's ancient farm in Tuscany. Leon was polite to me, even considerate. He remembered my favorite artists and gave me invaluable first editions of art albums. He would gently hold my waist in public to feign intimacy. But behind closed doors, we were more like business partners sharing the same roof. His conversations always revolved around business, mergers and acquisitions, and the cold medieval armor he collected in his private room. I played the role of a gentle and intellectual wife, showing appropriate interest in the history of those rusty metal pieces. Privately, Sophia and I kept in frequent contact via encrypted apps to exchange battle reports. Luca kicked up a fuss again on the yacht today for no reason. Sophia's voice carried the laziness of sea breeze and a hint of pride. It was just because I left a bottle of sunscreen next to his damn limited edition sailboat model. He actually suspected that I didn't care about his treasures at all. What an idiot! Those models together are worth enough for me to buy a small palazzo in Venice. Leon took me to see a 15th-century Milanese gauntlet he bought at an auction today. I stirred my affogato with a flat tone. I casually mentioned that I heard his cousin Luca outbid him for that Florentine knight sword he'd been coveting at Sotheby's London last month, paying twice the estimated price. He said nothing at the time, but he drank an extra glass of Brunello at dinner and stared at that set of Gothic full-body armor in the study for a long time. With our seemingly casual words, we chiseled cracks in the already fragile relationship between the cousins like the most patient craftsmen. Everything seemed to be going according to plan. However, undercurrents had long been surging within the family. The Martini family, especially Leon's mother, Signora Maria, always dressed in an Armani suit with her hair neatly styled, had always harbored a subtle disdain for my artistic background. During a family dinner, as everyone was savoring white truffles from Piedmont, she said casually, "Isabella, I heard your father's gallery has been struggling lately. You must understand that the wealth of true nobility is built on land, capital, and heritage, not those ethereal works of art." The table fell silent instantly, with only the faint clink of silverware against plates remaining. Leon just quietly cut the veal on his plate without defending me at all. At that moment, I truly felt the invisible, icy wall of class. The family summer gathering was held in a Baroque palace along the Grand Canal in Venice. The humid night air was mixed with the saltiness of the sea, and the unique damp smell of old stone walls. The dinner was held on a waterside terrace, with candlelight flickering and casting silhouettes of gondolas on the canal. The air was filled with the fruity aroma of Prosecco and intricate social undercurrents. The atmosphere of the dinner was even more oppressive than the Venetian night. Luca and Leon barely spoke to each other directly, and the occasional glances they exchanged were as cold as the snow in the Alps. Sophia and I tacitly played the role of peacemakers, but our words subtly added fuel to the fire. "Luca, I heard you performed brilliantly in the regatta in Monaco last month." I smiled gently. Leon was really sorry he couldn't go cheer for you in person. He was tied up with that Nordic merger at the time. I knew perfectly well that Luca hated it most when others regarded his sailing as a frivolous pastime. Sophia, nestled beside Luca, said to Leon, "Dear Leon, Luca has always admired your taste in auctions, especially regarding that knight's sword last time. He talked about it non-stop when he got back, saying that only you truly understand its value." She cleverly changed snatch to understand, which undoubtedly stimulated Leon further. The dinner ended in a weird atmosphere. Making an excuse to get some fresh air, I walked down the stone steps beside the palace alone and arrived under the Bridge of Sighs, which connects the prison and the court. The archway was dim, and the sound of canal water lapping against the stone walls echoed continuously, as if carrying the despair and sorrow of countless prisoners over the centuries. I had just stopped when a brute force with the stench of grappa hit me from behind, pinning me firmly against the cold, damp, moss-covered stone wall. It was Luca Rothschild. His brown eyes were ablaze with anger and trapped madness. "Isabella," he growled, his hot breath burning my ear. "Those little tricks you taught Sophia, those manipulative tactics, that pretense." His arm clamped around me like an iron hoop, almost crushing me. My heart sank to the murky bottom of the Venetian lagoon in an instant. Did he know? How? He leaned closer, his lips almost touching my skin, his voice deep and menacing. "Why don't you try using them on me yourself?" Fear and bone-chilling cold surged up my spine. I struggled desperately, my high heels slipping on the wet stone. In my desperation, my eyes swept across the archway entrance, and a gondola with a traditional lantern glided past slowly. The dim yellow light turned on like a stage spotlight. In that interplay of light and shadow, I saw a scene that made my blood freeze and my soul shatter. My husband, the always calm and restrained Leon, had an expression I had never seen before, almost devout enthusiasm and persistence. He was kneeling on one knee on the swaying gondola, holding a huge, perfectly cut diamond ring that sparkled even in the dim light, looking up at Sophia standing on the shore. And my best friend, smiling as triumphantly as if she had just won the Doge's election, readily accepted this absurd proposal. She met my gaze over Leon's shoulder, her eyes filled with the victor's pity and unhidden mockery. Time seemed to freeze at this moment. The ripples of the canal, Luca's breath, and the faint Venetian melody in the distance, all sounds turned into a shrill buzz in my ears. So that's how it was. We never manipulated them. The one manipulating everything was Sophia. My best friend, my only ally in this high-stakes gamble, had treated me as a pawn from the very beginning. She had used our plan as a bargaining chip, offering it to Leon in exchange for what she saw as a more stable and favorable position. Luca seemed to sense my stiffness and despair. He followed my gaze and saw the scene that turned everything upside down. His arm around me tightened sharply, almost choking me, and he let out a suppressed, beast-like roar, anger at Leon's betrayal, resentment at Sophia's defection, or perhaps a condemnation of the farce the three of us had jointly staged. I was about to summon all my strength to push him away, when a voice colder than the Po River in midwinter suddenly cut through the thick Venetian night. It seems my wife and my cousin have found a common reason to sigh under the bridge of sighs. Leon stood at the entrance of the archway, and there was no doubt that the diamond ring was now on Sophia's finger. The enthusiastic expression he had when proposing was gone, replaced by extreme coldness and a knowing clarity. His gaze, like a blade made of Venetian glass, fell precisely on Luca and me, whose bodies were almost pressed together. Sophia stood half a step behind Leon, clinging tightly to his arm, her face showing an unhidden, bright smile of victory. Under the glow of the lantern, her blonde hair was like a golden banner, mocking me wantonly. I took a breath of the musty air, and all my defenses, anger, and sharp retorts got stuck in my throat. But Luca suddenly let go of me, turned to glare at Leon, his voice hoarse with anger and alcohol. "Leon! You bastard! What did you do to her?" He was obviously referring to Sophia. Leon only raised his chin slightly, his gaze still fixed on my face, the ice-blue eyes bottomless. "What did I do?" His tone was flat. "I just gave Sophia the commitment and future she deserves. As for your wife, Luca, perhaps you should ask her what she has prepared for you during our marriage besides deliberately sowing discord between my cousin and me. For example, how to empty the Rothschild Trust Fund in your name more quickly." His words were like poisoned daggers, striking straight at the heart. How could he know all this in such detail? Sophia spoke up at the right moment, her voice as sweet as traditional Venetian mead. "Oh, Isabella, darling, I feel so sorry for you. But you have to understand, that's life, someone always has to pay for wrong choices." She waved her hand with the new ring. "Leon and I, we are soulmates. As for you and Luca..." She shrugged, leaving the rest unsaid. Soulmates? Luca and I? That was more absurd than Casanova's lies. Luca looked at Sophia, then suddenly turned to stare at me, his brown eyes swirling with a storm of rage from being double-crossed and utterly humiliated. Leon stepped forward and stood between Luca and me. His figure cast a huge and oppressive shadow under the narrow archway. "The farce ends here." His voice was not loud, but it clearly drowned out the sound of the canal water. "The lawyers will contact you tomorrow. As for the divorce terms..." He paused, a cold smile curving his lips. "We will handle them properly, in line with both legal provisions and moral standards." He spoke the last few words almost directly to me, with an overwhelming coldness and a sense of final judgment. I leaned against the cold, damp stone wall, and looked at the man I had once regarded as a fool and secretly plotted against countless times. Now he was as cold and unshakable as the stone walls of the Doge's palace. And beside him stood my newly engaged husband and my best friend, who smiled brilliantly, having betrayed me completely and resolutely. That agreement, that stake, that money, all turned into foam in the Adriatic Sea, shattering at the slightest touch. The Venetian night wind passed through the bridge of sighs, carrying the sorrows of countless prisoners over the centuries, brushing my cheeks, cold and biting, blowing away the last trace of my naivety. The divorce proceedings progressed like a carefully planned military operation. Leon's legal team was unstoppable like a Roman legion, arriving with conclusive evidence, mainly blurry photos of Luca and me meeting privately under the Bridge of Sighs, and some tampered communication records later proven to be provided by Sophia, implying an ambiguous relationship between Luca and me. The prenuptial agreement was enforced to the fullest extent, and the clauses regarding fidelity and public image became a noose around my neck. Headlines like "Martini Mistress Meets Husband's Cousin Secretly Under Bridge of Sighs," "Best Friend Socialite's Dream Shatters, Truth is Shocking," dominated the gossip pages of Corriere della Sera and major online platforms. In Italy, where coffee culture thrived, I became a laughingstock that people discussed with cornetti at breakfast. Some mocked my declining family background and my ambition to cling to the wealthy, some accused me of infidelity and greed. They dug up old photos of Leon and me at various cultural events, analyzing every frame for signs of my hypocrisy and scheming. At the same time, the story of Sophia and Leon, breaking through obstacles to pursue love bravely, was packaged by the public relations team into a modern version of Romeo and Juliet, without the tragic ending, cleverly covering up the calculations and betrayal behind it. The Martini family quickly distanced themselves from me. My former mother-in-law, Signora Maria, issued a brief statement through a spokesperson: "Ms. Isabella's actions have deeply shocked and disappointed us. The Martini family fully supports Leon's decision and believes that the law will render a fair verdict." The relatives who had once smiled at me at family gatherings now refused to answer my calls. Even heavier pressure came from my own family. My father's small gallery in Florence was already on the verge of collapse, and now it was hit even harder. Old clients cancelled their orders one after another, and the bank re-evaluated the loan risks. My mother sobbed uncontrollably over the transatlantic phone call. "Isabella, how could you do such a thing? How can we hold our heads high in Florence in the future? Those gossips." Your father was so angry that he almost had a heart attack. My father remained silent on the other end of the line, and finally let out a heavy sigh before hanging up. Class differences revealed their cruel and unfeeling true colors. I was like a cracked porcelain, tarnishing the family reputation, and being discarded by the Martini family without hesitation. And my own family, powerless to resist, was forced to bear even heavier financial and social pressure because of me. Luca's situation was equally difficult. The Rothschild family was extremely dissatisfied with his poor judgment and misconduct that damaged the family's reputation, which even affected several important investment and merger projects of the family in Europe. He was temporarily stripped of his management authority in the family's core businesses, and his resources and cash flow were restricted. This pent-up anger, with no other outlet, inevitably turned partly on me, the jinx. After an extremely cold and hostile divorce mediation session, Luca and I met again in the square outside the court. The midsummer sun in Rome blazed down on the ancient cobblestones. He had lost a lot of weight, and the impatience between his brows was replaced by deeper gloom. "Isabella," he stopped me, his voice hoarse, filled with unhidden hatred. "Look at us now. We're like two stupid fish thrown into the Trevi fountain, almost drowning." I was wearing oversized sunglasses, covering most of my face. "You lost control yourself, Luca. If it weren't for what happened under the Bridge of Sighs. Because that hypocrite Leon has been in cahoots with Sophia all along. They've been playing us for fools." He roared, the veins on his temples throbbing. "And your so-called plan with your best friend is the root of all this. We were too naive. Too arrogant." I retorted, my voice trembling with excitement. "Naive enough to think we could manipulate heirs who grew up amid power and scheming." The argument was meaningless, amounting to nothing but mutual accusations and rubbing salt into wounds. We both knew Leon and Sophia were the real culprits, but the anger and resentment between us, along with those, "if it weren't for you," assumptions, wrapped around us like vines, tightening more and more. However, the cruel reality pushed us into a deeper connection. After joining forces, Leon and Sophia not only pushed forward the divorce proceedings aggressively, but also began to use their combined resources to deliberately suppress Luca's personal business projects, even indirectly affecting my father's already precarious gallery. We were like prey cornered by the same hunters. Despite hating each other, we had to draw close to survive. Once, Luca came directly to the inconspicuous apartment I was renting temporarily in Rome's Trastevere district. He stood at the door, his tone stiff, with a hint of barely perceptible awkwardness. "I have an ancient olive grove with an attached winery in Puglia. I've invested a lot of money in the renovation project. Leon is using his connections to cut off my traditional sales channels and trying to influence the bank to refuse my follow-up loan. You used to handle some of Leon's art-related investments and charity funds, right? You know people from museums, hotels, and high-end boutiques, don't you?" I leaned against the doorframe, not letting him in. Why should I help you? I can barely hold myself together. Because neither of us wants to be trampled underfoot by that pair of bastards, with no chance to turn things around. He roared almost, his eyes like those of a trapped beast. Help me open new sales channels beyond their reach, and I'll give you 15% of the olive grove and winery's profits for the next 5 years. Besides, he lowered his voice, I know something about Sophia, things she definitely doesn't want Leon or the media to know. They might come in handy when it counts. It was a naked exchange of interests, mixed with threats and mutual exploitation. There was no trace of false warmth between us anymore. But looking out the window at the laundry hanging on the narrow streets of Trastevere, and hearing the lively, down-to-earth noise from the tavern below, so different from the atmosphere of martini family dinners, I knew I had no better choice. I needed money, leverage to fight back, and a way to survive. Our cooperation started with constant friction and mutual accusations. We argued about the branding of the olive oil, and how to approach boutiques that valued stories and heritage. He accused me of being too idealistic and ignorant of the harsh market realities. I mocked him for being reckless and impulsive, only knowing how to throw money at problems and failing to understand the cultural and emotional connotations required by the high-end market. We quarreled in rooms piled with olive oil samples and design sketches, argued on the bumpy road to Puglia, and even bickered over trivial details before meeting potential clients. Undeniably, however, we complemented each other in some ways. He had connections in the traditional agricultural sector of southern Italy and tough problem-solving skills that I lacked, while I could use my understanding of art, design, and storytelling to add value and appeal to his products, opening the doors to those discerning channels he had previously been unable to access. To figure out the details of Leon's suppression tactics, we had to meet frequently, sometimes at hidden private clubs in Rome, and sometimes even at his temporary residence in a farmhouse in Puglia. Quarrels were common, but occasionally, under extreme exhaustion and pressure, a strange calm would quietly settle over us. Once on the terrace of his farmhouse, with the endless olive grove stretching under the moonlight, its silver-green leaves swaying gently in the wind, and the air filled with the fragrance of rosemary and earth, he spoke in an unusually tired voice, Sometimes I wonder, what if I had met you first, instead of Sophia? My heart skipped a beat, seized by some emotion. I quickly covered up my sudden panic with a cold laugh, Spare me, Luca. There's only transaction and mutual exploitation between us. Don't forget, you almost broke my arm in Venice. He fell silent. Under the bright southern stars, his profile looked a little dazed, even vulnerable. At that moment, I absurdly felt a trace of pity for him. But we were both too badly wounded, and trust had long been washed away by the murky waters of Venice. This fleeting, perhaps illusory, tenderness could never melt the iceberg between us. Just as the winery and olive oil project began to show signs of progress, and we seemed to have found a fragile balance based on mutual interests, a heavier blow came. Sophia gave an interview to a major media outlet, tearfully accusing me of long-term psychological abuse, driven by jealousy of her happiness, claiming that I tried to copy her lifestyle but failed miserably, and then became resentful. She even implied that during her marriage to Luca, I had tried to seduce Leon, and when that failed, I turned my attention to pestering Luca. She portrayed herself as an innocent and perfect victim, while painting me as a psychologically distorted and ruthless schemer. This public opinion offensive, covering both traditional and social media, was extremely effective. I instantly went from a pathetic gold digger to a vicious conspirator, becoming the target of widespread condemnation in Italian social circles. The little trust and fragile balance we had painstakingly built through cooperation over the past few months were shattered once again. The suspicion and scrutiny in Luca's eyes when he looked at me intensified, worse than ever before. About what she said, the part about you seducing Leon, is it true? After a project meeting, he finally couldn't hold back and confronted me in the empty conference room, his voice cold, suppressing his anger. A wave of bone-chilling cold and absurd despair swept over me, and my blood seemed to freeze. Do you believe her? I countered, my voice trembling uncontrollably, my fingertips cold. Luca Rothschild, look at me. Do you believe every word she said? He didn't answer immediately, but that moment of silence, and the unmistakable struggle and doubt in his eyes, hurt more than any direct accusation. It was like a blunt knife slowly cutting through my already scarred heart. It turned out that our cooperation, which we had barely maintained for months, was so fragile in the face of inherent prejudice and carefully woven lies. Just as I was about to be completely crushed by the overwhelming slander, family pressure, my partner's suspicion, and utter isolation, an unexpected turn of events occurred. Luca found the paparazzi, who had taken the blurry photos near the Bridge of Sighs. Using some unconventional persuasion methods, unique to the Rothschild family, he forced the men to confess that Leon's personal assistant had specifically instructed him to take the photos, even providing specific shooting angles and composition suggestions to create the most ambiguous effect. At the same time, Luca used his remaining connections and resources, going to great lengths to unearth evidence of several secret financial transactions between Sofia and Leon before her marriage to Luca, transferred through offshore shell companies. Even more crucial evidence, a blurry but recognizable recording, documented the entire process of Sofia and Leon's conspiracy, showing that they had used Luca's and my divorce plan as her proof of loyalty to Leon. The truth was laid bare before us in the cruelest and most naked way. That day, Luca rushed to my small apartment in Trastevere like a madman. He even forgot to ring the doorbell and banged his fist directly on the old wooden door. When I opened the door, I saw him standing under the dim corridor light, his hair messy, his eyes bloodshot, his chest heaving violently, clutching a black USB drive tightly in his hand, as if it were a lifeline or a red-hot brand. Isabella. When he spoke, his voice was horribly hoarse, filled with a breakdown and pain I had never heard before. I was so blind. A complete fool. They played me for a fool, and I treated you like that. Doubted you like that. He almost stuffed the USB drive into my hand, his fingertips cold and trembling. Then, this man, who had always been arrogant, irritable, and seemingly in control of everything, suddenly lost all his support, squatted down slowly in utter embarrassment at my doorway, buried his face deep in his dark curls, and let out suppressed, wounded animal-like sobs. I'm sorry, truly sorry. I really was wrong. He repeated this over and over, his shoulders trembling uncontrollably. I stared at the small yet impossibly heavy USB drive in my hand, then at the man before me, completely broken, bearing his vulnerability. There was no schadenfreude as I'd imagined, no sense of victory, only a heavy, complex emotion, mingled with overwhelming bitterness, relief, and deeper exhaustion, that flooded over me like a tide. His past hostility, bad temper, stubbornness during our cooperation, loss of control under the bridge, and the hurtful suspicion just moments ago. All now had a clear and poignant explanation: the anger, frustration, and unvented pain from being deceived and betrayed by those closest to him had finally twisted into thorns that pricked me. I didn't help him up immediately, nor did I utter any words of forgiveness. I just stood there quietly, leaning against the doorframe, letting this belated, surging apology and the heavy truth linger in the narrow, silent corridor. Even the aroma of pasta sauce wafting through the air seemed to be tinged with bitterness. From that day on, Luca Rothschild underwent a complete transformation. He shed all his irritability and sharpness, and dispelled most of the gloom that had clouded his brows. He began to try to make amends in an awkward, careful, almost humble way. He would quietly use his remaining resources to ward off the tabloid reporters who still pestered me. He would leave my favorite Tuscan region coffee beans and fresh Maritozzi buns on my apartment doormat, never ringing the bell or sending a message, just leaving silently. He would stay up all night organizing all the evidence in my favor, categorizing and filing it into detailed reports that even my lawyer praised. He even took greater risks, using methods that skirted the edges of the law to unearth potential irregularities in Leon's cross-border transactions, as well as irrefutable proof of Sofia's fabricated academic credentials and her concealed embarrassing modeling past. He no longer defined our relationship by cooperation, and never mentioned interests again. He just gave silently, persistently, and without counting the cost, as if engaged in a lonely, lengthy act of atonement. Once I fell ill due to prolonged mental stress and a sudden flu, lying alone in my apartment with a high fever, my consciousness dazed. In that hazy state between sleeping and waking, I felt someone gently dabbing my forehead and neck with a cool towel, an act of gentleness bordering on devotion, a quality I'd never imagined associating with Luca. I strained to open my heavy eyelids, and through my blurred vision, I saw him sitting beside the bed, his eyes bloodshot, his lips tightly pressed, his gaze filled with unhidden compassion and anxiety. "Isabella," he noticed I'd woken, immediately leaned forward, and gently took my burning hand, his voice hoarse and almost broken. "Give me another chance. Not for revenge, not for any benefit, just to make amends, to make up for all my foolish, cruel mistakes. Give me a chance to protect you."